There are women who carry grief like a second skin, so tight, so familiar, that removing it would feel like dying twice. Elena had been that woman. A broken-hearted widow at 29, standing at her husband's funeral while whispers slithered through the church like smoke. They didn't mourn with her. They mocked. They always had. The plain girl who married above her station, the quiet wife who never quite belonged. But across the cemetery, through the veil of her tears, she saw him. Luca Damiano, her late husband's older brother. The mafia boss everyone feared to name aloud. He didn't look at the casket. He looked at her. And in his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Not pity, but recognition. As if he'd been waiting for this moment. As if her breaking was only the beginning. Some loves don't ask permission. They take root in ruins. If you believe love can bloom in the darkest places, if you've ever felt drawn to someone you were never meant to touch, then subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Because some stories aren't just about love, they're about surrender. There would come a night when Luca would stand before an entire room of men who'd once laughed at her, and his voice would be winter itself. Now they will fear you. But that night was still months away. First, there would be silence. Then there would be his hand on the small of her back in a darkened hallway. Then her name in his mouth like a confession. If you've ever been the one they underestimated, the overlooked, the dismissed, the ghost in your own life, then you know the particular ache of invisibility. Elena knew it. She'd worn it like a cloak since childhood, pretty enough to be noticed, not enough to be chosen, smart enough to listen, too quiet to be heard. And when Marco Damiano had chosen her, she'd believed it was love. It wasn't. It was convenience, a placeholder bride for a man who'd already given his heart to someone else. Falling for your dead husband's brother isn't a mistake. It's a detonation. It's the kind of choice that rewrites your name in every family record, that turns funeral flowers into accusations. But consequences only matter when you have something left to lose. And Elena, standing in that cemetery, already felt like ash. What's one more burning? This is the story of how a woman invisible to the world became impossible to ignore, how forbidden love became the only honest thing in a family built on lies, how a mafia boss, known for his cruelty, learned tenderness from the one person who never asked for it. It's about power, not the kind that comes from violence, but the kind that blooms when someone finally sees you. The Damiano estate smelled of old wood and older money, of espresso and jasmine climbing the courtyard walls. Marble floors reflected footsteps like accusations. The air tasted of salt from the distant sea, and secrets kept so long they'd fossilized. It was a beautiful tomb, and Eleanor, the widow, was its newest ghost. She didn't know then that Luca had watched her for years. That every family dinner where she'd sat quiet and small, he'd been cataloguing her. The way she held her wineglass, the fleeting expressions she thought no one noticed. She didn't know that Marco's death hadn't surprised him, or that his grief wasn't for his brother, but for her, the woman who'd wasted 3 years on a man who never deserved her. Some stories begin at the end. This one began at a funeral, with a look that promised redemption. The church had been full, but she'd never felt more alone. Marco's mother had stood at the front draped in black silk and theatrical sorrow, her sobs echoing off the vaulted ceiling. His cousins filled the pews, stone-faced and suited, their respect reserved for the dead, not the living. And Elena stood to the side, a shadow in her own tragedy, feeling the weight of their judgment like hands, pressing her into the ground. This is what you get for marrying into a family that never wanted you. The priest spoke of mercy and salvation, words that meant nothing to people who lived by a different creed. Marco had been many things, charming, reckless, unfaithful, but the eulogy painted him as a saint. Elena's jaw ached from holding back the truth. She wanted to scream it. He didn't love me. He never loved me, and all of you knew. But she stayed silent, because that's what she'd always done. Then she felt it, the prickling awareness of being watched. Her eyes lifted, scanning the sea of black, and found him, Luca. He stood in the back, apart from everyone, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the suffocating distance, and something in her chest cracked open. Not love, Not yet, but recognition. He looked at her the way no one else ever had, like she was real. The service ended. People filed out, their murmurs like insects. Eleanor moved through them mechanically, accepting condolences that felt like paper cuts. Such a tragedy. So young. You'll be taken care of. The last one came from Marco's uncle, his breath wine-sour, his hand lingering too long on her arm. She pulled away, her skin crawling. Outside, the October air bit at her exposed collarbones. Leaves skittered across the parking lot in anxious circles. She stood by the car, waiting for the driver, trying to remember how to breathe. Trying to figure out what came next when your entire identity had been tied to a dead man. "Eleanor?" His voice was low, textured like dark chocolate and smoke. She turned. Luca stood 3 feet away, closer than he'd ever been. Up close, she could see the silver threading through his black hair, the lines that bracketed his mouth, evidence of years spent commanding men twice his size. He was 43, 14 years older than her, and terrifying in a way that had nothing to do with his reputation. "I'm sorry," he said, and she heard the lie in it. Not sorry Marco was dead. Sorry for what Marco had done to her while living. "Thank you," she whispered, because what else was there to say? His jaw tightened. "The family wants to meet tomorrow about the estate, the business. You should be there." She almost laughed. "I'm not family. Not anymore." "You were his wife." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "That makes you mine to protect now." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Then he walked away, leaving her standing in the cold, her heart doing something it hadn't done in 3 years, racing. Some protections feel like cages, others feel like keys. The house Marco had bought her was a beautiful prison, modern, cold, all glass and sharp angles overlooking the city. He'd chosen it without asking her opinion, the same way he'd chosen everything, her wedding dress, their honeymoon destination, which friends she could keep. She'd loved him anyway, or convinced herself she had, because the alternative was admitting she'd wasted her 20s on a man who saw her as decor. That first night alone, she walked through rooms that echoed. His cologne still clung to the master bedroom. His shoes were still by the door, as if he might return to claim them. She should have felt sad. Instead, she felt nothing, just the vast, terrifying expanse of freedom she didn't know how to navigate. She poured wine with shaking hands, drank it standing at the window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. Not tears for Marco, tears for herself, for the girl who'd believed being chosen was the same as being loved, for all the times she'd made herself smaller to fit his life, for the broken-hearted widow everyone pitied, but no one truly saw. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The meeting is at 10. I'll send a car, Luca." She stared at the message, her pulse fluttering. She should decline, should pack a bag and disappear before the family swallowed her whole. But where would she go? Her parents were dead. Her friends had slowly been cut away one by one under Marco's subtle influence. She had nothing but this house and the ghost of a marriage. She typed back, "I'll be ready." The response came instantly. Good. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, remembering the funeral, the way Luca had looked at her. Not with pity, not with the dismissive assessment she'd grown used to from Marco's family, but with something that felt like hunger held carefully in check. It should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel alive for the first time in years. At 3 a.m. she gave up on sleep and wandered to Marco's study. She'd never been allowed in here. His private domain, filled with leather-bound books he never read, and a laptop she'd never touched. Now it was hers. She opened drawers at random, not sure what she was looking for. Evidence? Closure? She found it in the bottom drawer, a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. Love letters, but not to her. They were addressed to Gabriella, Marco's ex-girlfriend, the one he'd supposedly broken up with before proposing. The dates on the letters said otherwise. He'd been writing to her throughout their entire marriage. "I only married her because the family demanded it. You're the one I love. Just wait for me." Eleanor sat on the floor, the letters scattered around her like accusations. She should have felt devastated. Instead, she felt validated. All those nights he'd come home late, All those times he'd looked through her instead of at her. It hadn't been her fault. She hadn't been deficient. He'd simply never been hers. She laughed. A broken, bitter sound that echoed in the empty house. Then she gathered the letters, walked to the fireplace and burned them one by one, watched the words turn to ash, watched 3 years of lies disappear into smoke, and with each flame, something hard and bright crystallized in her chest. Not grief, not anymore. Rage. Some endings are really beginnings. Some fires clear the ground for new growth. The Damiano estate was exactly what she'd expected. A sprawling Mediterranean villa that spoke of old money and older sins. Iron gates, cypress trees lining the drive, marble fountains that whispered of empires. Eleanor had been here dozens of times for family dinners, always as Marco's accessory, always silent and decorative. Today the car dropped her at the front entrance like a supplicant. Luca was waiting on the steps. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like armor, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. As she approached, his eyes traveled over her, assessing, calculating. She'd dressed carefully, black dress, simple jewelry, hair pulled back, armor of her own. "They're already inside," he said, impatient as vultures. She swallowed. "What do they want?" "Everything." His gaze held hers. "But they won't get it." Before she could ask what he meant, he placed his hand on the small of her back and guided her inside. The touch was brief, professional, but it burned through the fabric of her dress. She felt the heat of his palm long after he dropped his hand. The family waited in the library, Marco's mother, his uncles, his cousins. They looked up as she entered, their faces ranging from indifferent to hostile. She'd never belonged here. Marco's death hadn't changed that. "Elena." His mother's voice was cold as January. "Please sit." She sat. Luca remained standing, positioning himself behind her chair like a guard. Or a threat. Marco's uncle Antonio leaned forward, his rings catching the light. "We've been discussing the estate. Marco's assets. The house, the accounts, his share of the family business." "His share belongs to Elena now," Luca said quietly. "By law." Antonio's smile was thin. "Marco was family. The business stays in the family. She is family." Luca's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Or do vows mean nothing to you?" The room tensed. Elena felt caught between forces she didn't understand. Old grudges, power plays, the intricate machinery of a family that operated more like a corporation or a crime syndicate. "The girl has no experience," Marco's mother said, her lip curling around the word girl. "She can't possibly manage." "Then I'll manage it for her." Luca's hand came to rest on Elena's shoulder. "Until she's ready." The family exchanged glances. Something passed between them. Calculations, recalibrations. Antonio sat back, his expression sour. "And what do you get out of this arrangement, Luca?" "Peace of mind." His fingers tightened slightly on her shoulder. "Marco was my brother. His widow is my responsibility." Responsibility. The word should have stung. Instead, it felt like a shield. The meeting continued. Lawyers' language, financial terms, threats wrapped in politeness. Eleanor barely heard it. She was too aware of Luca's presence behind her, solid and unmovable. Too aware of the way the family looked at her now, not with dismissal, but with wariness. As if she'd suddenly become something other than the quiet, invisible girl who'd married into their world. Finally, it was over. Papers were signed, grudging agreements reached. The family filtered out, leaving her and Luca alone in the library. She stood on shaking legs, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her hollow. "Why did you do that?" she asked. He studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Because they would have taken everything, and you've been taken from enough." Her throat tightened. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He stepped closer, and she caught his scent. Sandalwood and something darker like smoke from a wood fire. "I know Marco didn't deserve you. I know the family has treated you like a mistake. And I know—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Know what? That you're stronger than any of them realize, including you." The words pierced something deep. She'd spent so long being told she wasn't enough, not pretty enough, not sophisticated enough, not anything enough. And here was this man, this mafia boss everyone feared, telling her she was strong. She didn't believe him, not yet. But God, she wanted to. Some protections are strategic, others are prophecies. 3 weeks after the funeral, Luca invited her to dinner. A business discussion, the text said, about her late husband's assets, the next steps, the practicalities of inheritance. She told herself that's all it was, as she stood in front of her closet, paralyzed by the choice between armoring herself or allowing a sliver of vulnerability. She chose burgundy silk, understated but not invisible. She wore her hair down for the first time in months. The restaurant was small, tucked away in a neighborhood she didn't recognize, the kind of place where the owner greeted Luca by name and led them to a private room without asking. No menu appeared. The food simply came: fresh bread, olive oil that tasted like sunlight, pasta so delicate it dissolved on her tongue. "You don't believe in choices?" she asked, gesturing to the lack of menu. Luca's mouth almost smiled. "I believe in trusting people who know what they're doing. And if they get it wrong? They don't, not twice." The threat beneath the words should have frightened her. Instead, she felt a dark thrill. This was who he was. A man who controlled his world absolutely, who wielded power like other men wielded forks. And for some inexplicable reason, he'd turned that power toward protecting her. They talked about the estate, the lawyers, the family's attempts to contest Marco's will. Luca had blocked them at every turn, his influence absolute. She was wealthier now than she'd ever imagined, not just from Marco's assets, but from investments she hadn't known existed, properties in countries she'd never visited. "It's too much," she whispered. "I don't know what to do with any of it." "You don't have to decide tonight," he refilled her wineglass with careful precision. "Or tomorrow. Take your time. Learn. And when you're ready to step into that power—" His eyes met hers. "I'll be here." The wine was making her bold. "Why do you care?" "Because someone should have a long time ago." The simplicity of it stunned her. She looked down at her plate, her vision blurring. How long had it been since someone had asked what she needed instead of telling her what she should want? How long since anyone had seen her at all? "Tell me about Marco," she said quietly. "The real Marco. Not the saint they eulogized." Luca was silent for a long moment. "He was my brother. And he was selfish. Reckless. He took what he wanted without considering the cost. And he wasted—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "Wasted what?" "You." The word hung between them like a lit match. Elena's breath caught. In that moment, something shifted. The careful distance they'd maintained, the proper boundaries of forbidden love between a widow and her brother-in-law, all of it trembling on the edge of collapse. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move. "You should," he agreed. But he didn't call for the check. Instead, he asked about her childhood, her dreams before Marco, the person she'd been before invisibility became habit, and she found herself talking, really talking, for the first time in years. About the books she'd loved, the places she'd wanted to see, the small ambitions Marco had dismissed as impractical. "What did you want to be?" Luca asked. "Before." "A photographer." The admission felt like excavating something buried. "I wanted to travel, capture moments, tell stories through images." "Why didn't you?" "Marco said it wasn't serious, that we needed stability." She laughed bitterly. "So I put my camera away and became stable. I became nothing." "Show me," Luca said. "What?" "Your work, the photographs you took before." She shook her head. "They're just—" "Show me." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't a command either. It was an invitation to be seen. And God help her, she wanted that more than safety. They left the restaurant together. He drove her home, not in the family car with the driver, but in his own vehicle, a sleek black sedan that smelled like leather and danger. They didn't speak during the drive, but the silence felt full, charged, like the air before a storm. At her door, she hesitated. "Do you want to come in? See the photographs?" His hand tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, She thought he'd refuse, thought he'd keep that careful distance that protected them both. Then, yes, some dinners are business, others are the moment before everything changes. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. She felt his presence behind her like heat, like gravity pulling her into something inevitable. The house was dark. She didn't turn on the main lights, just the small lamp in the living room that cast everything in amber shadow. "They're in the study," she said. "I'll just—" But when she turned, he was closer than she'd expected. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw. Close enough to feel the tension radiating from him, restraint holding back something enormous. Elena. Her name in his mouth sounded like prayer and warning both. "I'm just getting the photographs," she said, but her voice had gone soft, breathless. She moved past him, feeling the electricity of almost touch, and entered the study. The albums were where she'd left them years ago, gathering dust on a shelf Marco had never looked at. She pulled them down, her fingers tracing the worn covers, and carried them back to the living room. Luca had removed his jacket. He sat on the couch, sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking dangerously domestic in a space that had only ever held coldness. She sat beside him, not touching, but close enough to share warmth, and opened the first album. The photographs were old. Her early 20s before Marco, when the world had still felt possible. Street scenes from the city at dawn, close-ups of strangers' hands, weathered by work, a series on an elderly couple in her neighborhood, their love evident in every casual touch. Luca studied each image with intensity, turning pages slowly, saying nothing. Eleanor watched him instead of the photographs, saw something soften in his expression, saw him seeing her through the evidence of what she'd once been capable of. "These are remarkable," he finally said. "They're just— no." He looked at her with that devastating directness. "They're proof that you see the world differently, that you find beauty in what others overlook." A pause. "He made you hide this?" "He said there was no money in it, that it was a hobby." Luca's expression darkened. "My brother was a fool." The words unlocked something. She found herself talking about those years, how Marco had slowly convinced her that her passions were childish, that being his wife was identity enough, how she'd put away the camera and put on the role of perfect spouse, how she'd disappeared into his life until she'd forgotten she'd ever had her own. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "Without him. Without that role. Then find out." Luca's hand covered hers where it rested on the album. The touch was electric. "Take the camera back, travel, do all the things he convinced you not to do." "It's not that simple." "It is." His thumb traced her knuckles. "You're free now, Elena. Truly free. The question is whether you'll be brave enough to choose that freedom." She looked at their hands, his large and scarred, hers small and pale. The contrast felt symbolic, and in that moment she understood what was happening. This wasn't just kindness. This wasn't just protection. This was a man who'd been watching her for years, who'd witnessed her slow erasure under his brother's indifference, who'd been waiting. "How long?" she asked. He knew what she meant. "Too long. Why didn't you—" "You were married. To my brother." His jaw clenched. "But I noticed you. Every family dinner, every holiday. The way you'd look at art on the walls like you were memorizing it. The way you'd smile at the staff, learning their names when everyone else ignored them. The way you'd go quiet when Marco interrupted you." Her heart was thunder. "I didn't know. You weren't supposed to." He withdrew his hand slowly, as if it cost him. "And you don't have to know now. This doesn't— Eleanor, I'm not telling you this to pressure you. I'm telling you because you asked, because I'm tired of lies, but your husband just died. You need time. Space. What if I don't want space?" The words escaped before she could stop them. The air between them ignited. Luca's eyes darkened, his whole body tensing like a predator suddenly aware of prey. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "Why?" "Because I've been restraining myself for 3 years, and my control has limits." The admission hung between them, raw, honest, dangerous. Elena felt her pulse in her throat, felt the warmth pooling in her stomach, felt every nerve ending come alive. This was wrong. It was too soon, too forbidden, crossing lines that would horrify the family and destroy what remained of her reputation. But God, she wanted it, wanted him, wanted to feel chosen, really chosen, for the first time in her life. She leaned forward, just an inch, just enough to be unmistakable. "Elena," his voice was gravel. "If I kiss you now, I won't stop. I won't be patient. I won't be gentle." "Good," she breathed, his restraint shattered. He kissed her like drowning, like starving, his hand fisting in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the angle. She gasped against his mouth, and he swallowed the sound, his other hand spanning her waist, pulling her closer until she was almost in his lap. The kiss was nothing like the careful, perfunctory affection Marco had offered. This was need, want, years of denial combusting into flame. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. The family will... I don't care." And shockingly, she meant it. Let them judge, let them whisper. She'd spent too long caring what others thought, molding herself to fit their expectations. If redemption meant choosing herself, choosing desire over decorum, then she'd embrace it. Luca pulled back, studying her face with that intense focus. "I should go, before I do something that can't be undone." She wanted to ask him to stay, wanted to pull him back into that kiss and let it consume them both. But he was right. They needed to be certain. This wasn't just attraction, it was detonation. He stood, gathering his jacket. At the door, he turned back. "Tomorrow night, dinner again. And we'll talk about what this means, what we're willing to risk." "Okay," she whispered. He almost left. Then he came back, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her once more. Soft this time, almost tender. A promise instead of a conflagration. "Dream of me," he said against her lips. Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the amber light, her fingers touching her mouth, her whole body humming with awakening. Some first kisses are the end of innocence, others are the beginning of everything. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover, and a body that felt foreign, alive, electric, hungry. For the first time in 3 years, she'd slept through the night. No anxiety. No waking at 3 a.m. to Marco's absence or presence, both equally hollow. Just deep, dreamless peace. Except she had dreamed. Of hands in her hair. Of a voice calling her name like it was sacred. Of heat and possibility, and the terrifying freedom of wanting something, someone without permission. Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her fingers tracing her lips where Luca's mouth had been. The sensible part of her whispered that this was madness. That a widow falling for her dead husband's brother was the plot of a scandal, not a life. That the family would crucify her for this forbidden love. But the rest of her, the part Marco had nearly extinguished, was screaming, "Finally, finally you're alive." She reached for her phone. No message from Luca. Disappointment curled in her stomach until she remembered. He'd said tonight, dinner again. A conversation about what this meant, what they'd risk. She had all day to decide what she wanted. Who was she kidding? She already knew. Elena rose and moved through her morning routine with a new kind of awareness. The shower water felt different on her skin, not just temperature but sensation. The coffee tasted richer. Even her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Eyes brighter, color in her cheeks, a woman waking up after years of sleepwalking. She found herself in the study again, the photograph albums still scattered on the coffee table where they'd left them last night. She picked up her camera, a relic from before, dusty and abandoned. The weight of it in her hands felt like recovering a severed limb, natural, essential, hers. She walked through the house, photographing it as if for the first time. The stark angles that had always felt cold now looked architectural, interesting. The way light fell through the glass in geometric patterns, the morning view of the city emerging from fog. She lost herself in the familiar rhythm, focus, frame, capture. When her phone rang hours later, she'd filled the memory card. "Elena." His voice made her stomach flip. "Tonight still works?" "Yes." A pause. She could hear him thinking, weighing words. Are you having second thoughts? She could lie, return to safety. No, she said instead. Are you? Not for 20 seconds in the last 12 hours. The admission was raw. But we need to be realistic about what this means, the consequences. I know. Do you? Because when I was 17, I watched my brother charm a girl at a party, sleep with her and never call her again. When I was 25, I watched him get engaged to a woman he loved, then cheat on her the week before the wedding. When I was 30, I watched him marry you, and I knew he'd waste you. Her throat tightened. You never said anything. What would I have said? Don't marry my brother. Marry me instead. He laughed darkly. You barely knew I existed. And I was... Elena, I'm not a good man. I run a business that operates in shadows. I've done things that would horrify you. I am my family's enforcer, the one they call when problems need to disappear. The kiss, the protection, the dinners, it's all selfish. Because I've wanted you for years, and now the one obstacle is gone, and I hate myself for being relieved he's dead. The confession hung between them like shattered glass. Elena closed her eyes, absorbing it. She should feel repulsed. Frightened. Instead, she felt seen, because he wasn't hiding behind pretty words. He was showing her the darkness, giving her the choice. What time tonight? She asked quietly. You still want to... What time? 7. I'll pick you up. Okay. Eleanor. His voice softened. You can say no to all of this. I'll still protect your interests. Still keep the family at bay. You don't owe me anything. I know. She opened her eyes, looking at the photographs scattered around her. Evidence of who she used to be, who she might become again. But I want this. I want... Her voice caught. I want to be wanted. Not as someone's accessory or obligation, but for myself. Then let me, he said, and the words sounded like a vow. After they hung up, Eleanor stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter, trying to process the enormity of what she'd just chosen. This wasn't a casual decision. This was jumping off a cliff and hoping flight was possible. The family would be vicious, society would judge. She'd go from pitied widow to scandalous woman in a single revelation. But wasn't scandal better than invisibility? Wasn't being wanted, even wrongly, even dangerously, better than being forgotten? She thought of Marco, of the love letters to another woman, of 3 years spent trying to earn affection that was never available, of making herself smaller and smaller until she'd nearly disappeared. Then she thought of Luca, the way he looked at her like she was a work of art, the way his kiss had felt like waking up, the way he'd said, "You're stronger than any of them realize, including you." Maybe he was right, maybe she was. She pulled out her camera and took a selfie, something she'd never done before. In the image, her eyes were bright with fear and excitement both. She looked uncertain, alive, real. She sent it to Luca with one word: tonight. His response came immediately, an address. And then, wear whatever makes you feel powerful. She smiled and began planning what to wear to her own redemption. Some mornings you wake up as the person you were. Others you wake up as who you're becoming. The address Luca sent wasn't for a restaurant. It was for a gallery, a small exclusive space in the arts district, known for showcasing emerging photographers. Elena stood outside, confused, checking the message again. She'd worn black again, not mourning this time, but armor. A silk dress that moved like water, heels that gave her height and confidence both. Her hair loose, lipstick the color of wine. Luca appeared from around the corner, devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a sweater that made him look less like a mafia boss and more like someone who could exist in her world. Almost normal, except for the intensity in his eyes when he saw her. "You're stunning," he said simply. "This isn't a restaurant." "No, it's better." He offered his arm. "Come." The gallery was closed, but he had keys. Inside, the space glowed with carefully positioned lights, white walls displaying photographs in clean, modern frames. And as Elena walked deeper into the space, her breath caught. They were her photographs, the ones from the albums, the street scenes, the elderly couple, the images she'd taken years ago and hidden away. Someone, Luca, had pulled them out, printed them professionally, framed and hung them like they mattered, like they were art. How did you... I went back last night, after the kiss. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her instead of the walls. I took the albums to a friend who owns this gallery. We worked through the night. And before you protest, he caught her hand. This is who you are, Elena. This is what Marco tried to erase. I wanted you to see it, really see it. Not as abandoned dreams, but as proof of your worth. Her vision blurred. Luca, there's food in the back, wine, a table set for two. But first, I wanted you to walk through your own exhibition, to understand that you were never nothing. You were just unseen. She walked through the gallery in a daze, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. Each photograph was a piece of her former self, the girl who'd seen beauty in weathered hands and dawn-lit streets, who'd believed the world was full of stories worth capturing, the girl she'd buried to become Marco's wife. There are buyers interested, Luca said quietly behind her. She spun. What? My friend showed them to 3 collectors. They want to purchase. And a magazine editor wants to commission new work. He stepped closer. This isn't charity, Elena. This is recognition. You're talented. You always were. The tears came then, not sad, but releasing years of being told her dreams were impractical, her vision insufficient. She covered her face with her hands, and then Luca was there, pulling her into his chest, his arms solid around her. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you. She let herself break. Let the sobs come. For lost years, for the woman she'd almost stopped being, for the terrifying joy of being seen. He held her through all of it, his hand stroking her back in slow, soothing circles, his heart steady beneath her cheek. When the storm passed, she pulled back, laughing wetly. I've ruined your sweater. I have others. His thumb brushed away her tears with devastating gentleness. Better, better. She looked up at him, this dangerous man showing her tenderness. Thank you. For this. For everything. Don't thank me yet. His expression turned serious. Come, let's eat. And talk about the hard things. The back of the gallery had been transformed into an intimate dining space, a small table with candles, food laid out like an offering, homemade pasta, fresh bread, wine that probably cost more than her first car. They sat across from each other, and for a moment Elena just absorbed the surreal beauty of it, eating dinner surrounded by her own forgotten work, with a man who'd taken the time to resurrect it. The family knows, Luca said after they'd started eating. About us, or suspects. Elena's fork paused. How? Marco's mother saw me leave your house last night, late. He took a drink of wine. She called me this morning, asked what I thought I was doing with that girl. What did you tell her? That what I do is none of her concern. His jaw tightened, but it won't stop there. They'll apply pressure, make your life difficult. Try to force you out of the family assets by making your position untenable. I don't care about the money. You should. He leaned forward. Not because of greed, but because it's power, and power is the only language they understand. If you walk away from Marco's estate, you're surrendering. They'll see you as weak, easy to dismiss. And if I stay? Then you fight. With me beside you. His eyes held hers. But you need to understand what that means. I'm not just Luca Damiano, Elena. I'm the head of the family business, the legitimate one and the one that operates in shadows. Associating with me, being with me, it marks you, changes how people see you. She thought about it. The broken-hearted widow becoming the mafia boss's lover, the scandal, the judgment, but also the freedom, the choice, the refusal to disappear. What do you want? She asked. You. No hesitation. However I can have you. But I want it to be your choice, not because you feel obligated or grateful, not because I've maneuvered you into it, but because you want me as much as I want you. Eleanor set down her fork, stood, walked around the table until she was beside him. His eyes tracked her movement, dark and hungry and carefully controlled. She took his face in her hands, felt the rasp of stubble against her palms, looked into the eyes of a man who'd shown her more consideration in weeks than her husband had in years. "I want you," she said. "I want this, whatever the cost." He stood then, towering over her, and the control she'd seen fraying snapped. He kissed her, like claiming, like promise, his hands spanning her waist and lifting her onto the table. Plates shifted, wine glasses tilted, neither of them cared. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her dress riding up, and felt the hard evidence of his desire against her. Elena. Her name was half warning, half prayer. "If we do this, stop asking me if I'm sure." She pulled back enough to look at him. "I've spent years being careful, being appropriate, diminishing myself for someone who never appreciated it. I'm done with that. I want to be reckless. I want to want something and take it." His eyes blazed. "Then take me." She did. Kissed him with all the hunger she'd suppressed, felt his hands slide up her thighs, felt heat pooling low in her stomach. The world narrowed to sensation, his mouth on her neck, her fingers in his hair, the desperate sounds they were both making. But then he pulled back, breathing hard. "Not here, not like this. You deserve better than a table in a gallery." "I don't care where I do." He rested his forehead against hers. "When I make love to you, and I will, it won't be rushed, it won't be frantic. I'm going to take my time, learn every sound you make, find every way to make you say my name." The promise in his words made her shiver. "When?" "Soon." He helped her down from the table, steadying her when her legs proved unreliable. "But first we do this right. Dinner, conversation, courtship, however strange that sounds given the circumstances." She almost protested, but looking at him, at the restraint it cost him, the care he was showing, she understood. He was giving her time to be certain, making sure this was choice, not impulse. They finished dinner with charged looks and careful distance, talked about the photographs, her potential commissions, his hope that she'd start creating again. He told her about growing up with Marco, the ways his younger brother had always taken what he wanted without considering consequences, how their father had enabled it, favoring the charming son over the serious one. "Did you resent him?" Elena asked. "Sometimes, especially when he got you." Luca's expression darkened. "I saw you first, you know, at that charity gala 7 years ago. You were photographing the event, early in your career, trying to build a portfolio. You had this focus, this intensity, like the camera let you see the world more clearly, and I thought—" He stopped. "What?" "That you were the most interesting person in the room, and then Marco saw you, and he wanted you because I'd looked at you first." Luca's laugh was bitter. "That's who he was, competitive to the point of cruelty. And I let him have you because you seemed happy, because I thought he'd change for you. He didn't. No. He just made you change instead." The truth of it settled between them. Elena reached across the table, taking Luca's hand. "I don't regret the marriage, not entirely, because it brought me here, to this moment, to you. That's generous. It's honest." She squeezed his fingers. "And I'm done lying to myself or anyone else." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with old-world courtliness. "Then let's be honest together." They left the gallery near midnight. He drove her home slowly, their hands clasped on the console between them. At her door he walked her up, and the air between them thrummed with anticipation. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes." "And the day after?" "Yes." "And the day after that?" She smiled. "Are you asking to court me, Luca Damiano?" "I'm asking to know you, really know you, not as Marco's widow, not as the woman I've wanted from a distance, but as Elena, whoever she's becoming." It was the right answer. The only answer. She kissed him, soft, lingering, full of promise rather than desperation. "Tomorrow," she whispered against his mouth. "Tomorrow," he agreed. And this time when he left, she didn't feel alone. She felt anticipated, chosen, alive. Some nights end in regret, others end in becoming. Elena woke to her phone ringing, an unknown number at 8 a.m. She answered groggily, her body still humming from last night's kisses. "Miss Damiano?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. This is Sophia from Loose Magazine. I'm calling about a potential commission. Mr. Damiano gave us your number. Do you have a moment to discuss a project? Eleanor sat up, suddenly awake. Yes, of course. The conversation lasted 30 minutes. They wanted a photo essay on the city's hidden corners, the places tourists never saw, where real life happened. It was exactly the kind of work she'd dreamed of. They offered a fee that made her dizzy, a publication credit. Potential for ongoing work. When she hung up, she screamed into her pillow with joy. Then her phone buzzed. Luca, tell me you said yes to the magazine. How did you know they'd call this morning? I may have suggested they not waste time. You're too talented for them to risk losing you to another publication. She smiled, typing, Thank you. Don't thank me, just create. And send me the first image you take today. I want to see the world through your eyes. Elena got out of bed with purpose for the first time in years. She showered, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, clothes for moving through the city, not for being looked at. She grabbed her camera, charged and ready, and left the glass prison Marco had chosen for her. The city welcomed her like an old friend. She wandered streets she'd never explored, finding beauty in graffiti-covered walls and elderly men playing chess in the park. She photographed a flower vendor arranging roses, her weathered hands moving with the precision of an artist. A child chasing pigeons, pure joy on his face. The way morning light turned a puddle into a mirror. She lost herself in the work, in the rhythm of seeing and capturing. Hours passed unnoticed. Her phone buzzed multiple times, texts from Luca asking how it was going, if she'd eaten, reminding her to drink water. The casual care in the messages made her chest ache in the best way. At a cafe, she finally stopped for lunch, sent him her favorite image from the morning, a shot of an older woman sitting alone at a bus stop, her profile silhouetted against the bright advertisements behind her. Dignity in solitude. His response came immediately. She looks like she's waiting for something that matters, like you. What am I waiting for? To become who you were always meant to be, but you're not waiting anymore. You're doing. She stared at the message, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest. This was what forbidden love felt like when it was right, not shameful, but inevitable. Not a betrayal, but a claiming of self. Her phone rang. Luca. Hi, she answered, smiling like a fool. Come to my place tonight. I'll cook. His voice was low, intimate. I want to show you my world. Not restaurants or galleries, just home. Okay. Eleanor. A pause. Bring an overnight bag. I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to have the option. No pressure, but I want you to know you're welcome in my space in my life. Her heart stuttered. I'll be there. What time? Whenever you're ready. After they hung up, Elena sat in the cafe, processing. An overnight bag. His home. The careful way he'd offered it, giving her choice, making space for her comfort. This was moving fast. Too fast by any conventional measure. But nothing about them was conventional. She thought about the family's judgment, the scandal brewing, about the fact that Marco had been dead less than 2 months, about all the reasons she should slow down, be careful, protect her reputation. Then she thought about the photograph albums displayed as art, about being called talented by a real magazine, about kisses that made her feel like herself again, about a man who noticed when she hadn't eaten. She opened her phone and texted, I'm ready now. Send me the address. When she arrived at his building 2 hours later, a converted warehouse in the industrial district, all exposed brick and enormous windows, her overnight bag felt heavy with significance. She took the elevator to the top floor, her pulse quickening with each ascending number. Luca opened the door before she could knock. He wore jeans and a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking younger and more approachable than she'd ever seen him. His eyes traveled over her face, reading her anxiety. You can change your mind, he said quietly. About any of this. I'll never be angry, just honest. I don't want to change my mind. She stepped inside. I want to stop being afraid of wanting things. His apartment was stunning. Massive open space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture, bookshelves covering one entire wall. art on the walls, real art, not the ostentatious displays Marco had favored. It felt like a home, not a showroom. "You're staring," he said, amused. "It's not what I expected." "What did you expect? Weapons on the walls, shadows and secrets?" "Maybe." She turned to him. "I forget sometimes what you are, who you are." "Good." He took her bag, setting it by the couch. "Because here I'm just Luca, not the family enforcer, not the mafia boss, just a man who wants to cook you dinner and hear about your day." And that's what they did. He cooked, really cooked, not just heated expensive takeout. Fresh pasta made by hand, sauce that simmered with garlic and basil, bread he'd baked that morning. She sat at his kitchen counter, drinking wine and telling him about the photographs, the people she'd seen, the way the city felt different when she was looking for beauty instead of escape. "You're luminous when you talk about your work," he said, watching her with that focused intensity. "Like you're lit from inside." I forgot how much I loved it. Creating something, seeing, really seeing. "Marco stole that from you?" "No," she shook her head. "I gave it away. That's what hurts most. Not that he took it, but that I let him. That I thought making myself smaller would make him love me more." Luca came around the counter, standing close. "His failure to love you had nothing to do with your worth. You could have been perfect. You were perfect, and it wouldn't have mattered. He wasn't capable of seeing you. And you are. I've been seeing you for 7 years." He cupped her face gently. "Every family dinner when you'd get that faraway look, like you were somewhere else in your head. Every holiday when you'd help in the kitchen instead of sitting with the other wives, because you couldn't stand their cruelty dressed as gossip. Every time Marco interrupted you, and you'd just go quiet instead of fighting. I saw all of it, and I hated that you were wasted on him." Tears pricked her eyes. "I feel like I'm grieving someone I never actually had." "Then grieve. Cry, be angry. You're allowed all of it." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "But don't let that grief convince you that you're not worthy of something real now, because you are. Elena, you're—" She kissed him before he could finish, rose on her toes and pressed her mouth to his, swallowing whatever declaration he'd been about to make, because hearing it would make this too real, too intense, and she was already overwhelmed by the enormity of what she felt. He made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. She felt the careful control he'd been maintaining start to slip, felt his hands tighten on her waist, felt the evidence of his desire pressing against her. "Dinner," he murmured against her mouth. "Later. Eleanor, please." She looked up at him, letting him see her need. "I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be careful or appropriate. I want you. Now." She watched the last thread of his restraint snap. His eyes darkened to black, and then he was lifting her, her legs wrapping around his waist, his mouth claiming hers as he carried her down the hallway to his bedroom. Some dinners are meant to be interrupted. Some hungers can't wait. Eleanor woke to golden light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar warmth of another body beside her. For a moment, she floated in the space between sleeping and waking, where nothing was real yet. Then memory crashed in. Last night, Luca's hands, the way he'd worshipped her body like it was sacred, the sounds she'd made that she'd never made before. She turned her head. He was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that made her breath catch, tender, possessive, satisfied. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." His hand came up to trace her jaw. "How do you feel?" Alive, changed, marked in ways that had nothing to do with the physical. "Good. Really good." "No regrets?" She thought about it honestly, about the fact that she'd just slept with her dead husband's brother barely 2 months after the funeral, about how this would look to the family, to the world, about how none of that mattered compared to how she felt. Seen, wanted, whole. "Not even one," she said. His smile was devastating. "Good. Because I have several plans for you today, and all of them involve keeping you in this bed." Heat flooded through her. "Ambitious? You have no idea." He leaned down, kissing her slow and deep, and she felt her body responding again, ready despite the pleasant soreness. His hand slid down her side, and she arched into his touch. Her phone rang, loud and insistent from the living room where she'd left it in her bag. Luca groaned. Ignore it. What if it's the magazine? Then they'll call back. His mouth found her neck, but the phone kept ringing and ringing. Eleanor pulled away reluctantly. I should check, just in case. She wrapped herself in his shirt, enormous on her, smelling like him, and padded to the living room. Found her phone in her bag. 7 missed calls. All from Marco's mother. Her stomach dropped. What is it? Luca appeared behind her, reading her expression. Your mother. 7 calls. His jaw tightened. She knows you're here. How would she? She has people. Eyes everywhere. He took the phone gently. Do you want me to call her back? No, I will. Eleanor squared her shoulders. I'm done hiding, done being afraid of her judgment. She called. The phone rang once. You shameless little whore. Teresa Damiano's voice was acid. My son is barely cold in the ground, and you're already fucking his brother. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. She felt Luca tense beside her, ready to intervene. But this was hers to handle. Marco was cold long before he died, Elena said quietly, in all the ways that mattered. How dare you? I dare because it's true. Your son married me as a convenience. He never loved me. He was still in love with Gabriella, writing to her throughout our entire marriage, planning to leave me once the family stopped pressuring him about producing an heir. Silence on the other end. Then, you're lying. I found the letters, dated throughout our marriage, tied with a ribbon like they were precious. Elena's voice stayed steady despite the rage building. So don't you dare call me shameless when your son made me a widow long before he actually died. That's still no excuse to seduce Luca, to throw yourself at him like some desperate... I didn't seduce anyone, Elena cut her off. And even if I had, it's none of your business. I'm not your property. I never was. Marco's death doesn't mean I owe you performative grief. The family will disown you. Cut you off completely. Good. Elena looked at Luca, who was watching her with something like pride. I don't want anything from people who've only ever made me feel small. You'll regret this, both of you. The scandal will fade. They always do. Elena ended the call. Her hands were shaking. Luca took the phone, setting it aside, and pulled her into his arms. You were magnificent, he murmured against her hair. I think I just declared war. No, you just declared independence. He pulled back to look at her. But she's right about one thing. There will be consequences. The family will make things difficult, try to isolate us, turn business partners against me, society against you. Are you having second thoughts? God, no. He kissed her forehead. I'm just making sure you understand what you're signing up for. Being with me means choosing a side. It means accepting that some doors will close. Eleanor thought about it. About the life she'd lived as Marco's wife. Welcomed superficially, judged constantly, never quite belonging. About the women who'd smiled to her face and gossiped behind her back. About a family that had taken her presence for granted and her worth as negligible. What doors are closing that were ever really open? She asked. Your mother hated me from day one. The family tolerated me at best. Society only accepted me as Marco's accessory. I've spent 3 years trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. Maybe it's time I stopped trying. And do what instead? Build my own spaces, take the magazine commission, sell some photographs, travel, become the person I was supposed to be before I tried to become what Marco wanted. She looked up at him. With you, if you still want that. Want it? His laugh was almost pained. Elena, I've wanted nothing else for years. But I need you to understand. I come with darkness. My work, my responsibilities, they're not clean. There are things I can't tell you, things I do that you're better off not knowing. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. You deserve that. She studied his face, the harsh lines, the grey threading his temples, the eyes that had seen too much. He was right. He wasn't a safe choice. He was power and danger wrapped in tailored clothes and unexpected tenderness. Being with him meant accepting ambiguity, living in moral grey spaces, becoming someone the respectable world would judge. But the respectable world had never given her anything but pain. "I don't need you to be perfect," she said. "I just need you to be honest, and to see me, really see me. Can you do that? I've been doing that for 7 years. Then that's enough." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, a seal on the choice they were both making. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "No going back now," he said. "Good, I'm tired of looking backward." They spent the day exactly as he'd promised, in bed, learning each other, talking between bouts of touch that left her breathless and remade. He asked about her childhood, her parents who died when she was young, the loneliness that had made Marco's attention feel like salvation. She asked about his scars, the ones visible and the ones that weren't. About his father's expectations, the weight of running a family business that operated in shadows, the isolation of being the one everyone feared. "Don't you get lonely?" she asked, tracing the line of his collarbone. "I did. Before you." His fingers found hers threading together. "Now I'm just awake, present, like I've been sleepwalking and suddenly remembered how to live. I know that feeling." They ordered food when hunger finally outweighed desire, ate pizza in bed like teenagers, laughed about nothing important, and in between the touches and conversations, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years, safe. Not because Luca would protect her from external threats, but because he saw all of her, the broken parts, the angry parts, the parts that wanted too much and wanted her anyway. As evening fell, painting the room in amber and gold, she lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "What happens now?" she asked. "We keep doing this. Dinners, mornings. You take your photographs, I handle the family. We build something real in the middle of the chaos. That simple, that complicated." He kissed the top of her head. "The family will push back. But I'm not my brother, Elena. I don't scare easily, and I don't give up what's mine." The possessiveness should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like redemption, being claimed by someone who actually saw her worth. "I'm not giving you up either," she said. "Even if they come with pitchforks. Especially then, I look good in firelight." She laughed, and the sound felt like healing. Some mornings change everything. This one had changed them both. 3 weeks later, Luca asked her to be his date to a charity gala. The kind of high society event where the family would be present, where their relationship would become undeniably public, where whispers would turn to roars. "Are you sure?" Elena asked, standing in his closet, which had slowly accumulated her things, dresses and shoes, and the comfortable chaos of cohabitation. "We could wait. Keep this private a while longer. I'm done hiding you." He came up behind her, his arms circling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I want to walk into that room with you. I want everyone to see us together and know that you're mine, that I'm yours. No shame, no apology. Your mother will be there. I'm counting on it." Elena turned in his arms. "You want to provoke her. I want to make a statement that you're not going anywhere, that anyone who comes for you comes through me." His eyes were dark, serious. "But only if you're ready. I won't push." Was she ready? To face the broken-hearted widow whispers becoming shameless mistress accusations? To see the judgment in faces that had barely tolerated her before? To become the scandal everyone would discuss over champagne and canapes? She thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, small, quiet, trying so hard to be acceptable. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, photographer, lover to a dangerous man, someone who'd chosen herself over reputation. "I'm ready," she said, "but I get to choose my own dress this time." She chose red, deep, unapologetic crimson that hugged her body like a second skin, her hair down in waves, makeup bold. When Luca saw her, something primal flashed in his eyes. "You're trying to start a war," he said. "I thought you liked me brave." "I love you brave." The words slipped out, unplanned, hanging between them like a held breath. Eleanor's heart stopped. They hadn't said it yet, had been carefully avoiding the enormity of that admission. But now it was out, raw and real, and she could see the moment Luca realized what he'd said could see him bracing for her retreat. Instead, she stepped close, her hand on his chest. "Say it again." "Elena." "Say it." His jaw clenched. "I love you. I've loved you for longer than is reasonable or sane. And if that scares you, I love you too." The words felt like jumping off a cliff, like the bravest thing she'd ever said. Even though it's fast and complicated and completely insane, his kiss was answer enough. They arrived at the gala fashionably late, a calculated move that ensured everyone was already there to witness their entrance. Eleanor felt every eye turn as they walked in together, Luca's hand possessive on her back. The whispers started immediately, a rising tide of shock and judgment. There was Marco's mother, standing with a cluster of family members, her face transforming into fury when she saw them. There were the society wives who'd never accepted Elena, their expressions ranging from horror to grudging fascination. And there, in the corner, was Gabriella, Marco's true love, looking at Elena with something like respect. "Everyone's staring," Elena murmured. "Let them." Luca led her further into the room, his posture that of a man who owned every space he entered. "You look like a queen. Act like one." So she did. She smiled at the people who dismissed her, made polite conversation with the ones brave enough to approach, introduced herself to strangers without mentioning Marco first, just Eleanor, photographer, her own person. And with Luca beside her, radiating protective authority, no one dared be openly cruel. Until Teresa Damiano cornered them by the bar. "This is disgusting," she hissed, her voice low enough not to carry but venomous enough to wound. "My son is barely in the ground, and you parade his whore around like she's something to be proud of." "That's enough, Mother." Luca's voice could have cut glass. "It's not enough, it's not nearly—" "I loved Marco," Eleanor interrupted quietly, surprising herself. "I tried so hard to love him, but he never loved me back. And I'm done apologizing for refusing to grieve a marriage that was already dead." Teresa's eyes blazed. "You have no right. I have every right. I was his wife. I endured his infidelity, his indifference, his casual cruelty, and I stayed quiet because I thought that's what love required. But it doesn't." Elena stepped forward, her voice strengthening. "Love requires seeing each other, choosing each other, actually being present. And your son was never capable of that. Not with me. Maybe not with anyone. How dare you speak about him? With honesty?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "Someone should, because the saint everyone's eulogizing never existed. He was charming and reckless and selfish, and I wasted 3 years trying to earn affection from someone who'd already given his heart to someone else." The words hung in the air. Teresa looked between Eleanor and Luca, something ugly and defeated settling into her expression. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "Both of you. The family won't accept it. The business partners won't tolerate it. You're destroying everything for a cheap affair." "Then we'll build something new," Luca said coldly, "something not rotted by hypocrisy and cruelty. And if the family can't handle that, they know where the door is." He took Eleanor's hand, leading her away from his mother, away from the judgmental stares, out onto the terrace where they could breathe. The city spread below them, glittering and indifferent to their small drama. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "I shouldn't have—" "You were perfect." He turned her to face him. "Do you know how long I've wanted someone to say those things to her? To call out the fiction our family lives in? It won't make things easier." "No, but it makes them honest." He cupped her face. "And I'd rather have honest and difficult than easy and false." They stood there, the sound of the party muffled behind them, the future uncertain but theirs to shape. Eleanor thought about the woman she'd been at Marco's funeral, invisible, grieving a man who'd never truly seen her, and she thought about who she was now, bold, flawed, choosing forbidden love over approval. "No going back," she said. "No going back," he agreed. Behind them, through the glass doors, the party continued. People would talk. The scandal would spread. There would be consequences they couldn't yet imagine. But Elena Damiano, for the first time in her life, didn't care. Some entrances are exits in disguise. Some rebellions look like evening gowns. The scandal made headlines, not mainstream news, The Damianos were too powerful for that. But in society circles, in the whispered conversations of people who trafficked in reputation, Elena and Luca became infamous overnight. The widow and the brother, the forbidden love that proved she'd never properly grieved. Elena's phone exploded with messages, old friends emerging from silence, some supportive, most curious, a few viciously judgmental. She ignored them all, because simultaneously her professional life was blooming. The magazine published her photo essay to critical acclaim. Gallery owners called, collectors inquired. Her work, the thing Marco had dismissed as a hobby, was suddenly in demand. "This one," Luca said one morning, standing before a photograph she'd taken of an elderly man feeding pigeons in the park. "This is my favorite." "Why?" "Because you saw him, really saw him. Not as a homeless man or a nuisance, but as someone with dignity, someone with a story." He turned to her. "That's your gift, Elena. You see people the way they wish to be seen." She moved to stand beside him. "Is that how you see me? As someone with a gift? I see you as someone who's been exceptional all along. The world is just finally catching up." The validation settled into her bones. For so long she'd measured herself by Marco's indifference, by the family's dismissal, by her own internalized belief that she wasn't enough. But here was evidence, tangible, external, undeniable, that she'd been wrong, that her vision mattered, that she was, in fact, remarkable. That afternoon she returned to the cemetery. She hadn't been back since the funeral, hadn't felt the need or desire. But something pulled her there now. Some need for closure, or maybe just to acknowledge how far she'd traveled from that grieving, invisible woman. Marco's grave was well tended, fresh flowers, Teresa's doing probably part of her performance of perfect motherhood. Elena stood there, hands in her coat pockets, feeling nothing like the crushing guilt she'd expected. "I don't hate you," she said quietly to the headstone. "I thought I would after finding the letters, after everything, but I just feel sad. Sad that you couldn't love me. Sad that I wasted so much time trying to earn something that was never available." She paused. "And sad that you never knew yourself well enough to be honest, about Gabriella, about what you wanted, about who you were." The November wind rustled through the trees. A few leaves skittered across the grave. "I hope you're at peace," she continued. "I hope wherever you are, you've found whatever you were looking for, because I finally have." She took a breath. "I'm with Luca now, and I know that probably seems like a betrayal to you, but it isn't. It's just life continuing, me continuing. And I think if you'd ever really loved me, you'd want that for me." She pulled out her camera, took a photograph of his grave, not morbid, but documentary, a marker of this moment, this goodbye. The image captured the marble headstone, the fresh flowers, the long shadow cast by the afternoon sun. Melancholy but not tragic, an ending that allowed for new beginnings. When she lowered the camera, she felt lighter, unburdened. The broken-hearted widow identity finally, fully shed. Her phone buzzed. "Luca, where are you?" "Cemetery, saying goodbye." A pause, then, "Want company?" "I'm already finished. Meet you at home?" "Home. I like the sound of that." She smiled, pocketing the phone. Home. Not the glass prison Marco had chosen, but Luca's loft with its enormous windows and her photographs on the walls. The space they were building together, part his, part hers, wholly theirs. As she walked back to her car, she passed other graves, other stories. An elderly woman placing flowers on what must have been her husband's grave, her movements tender and ritual. A young man crying openly, fresh grief still raw. A family gathered around a child's grave, their collective sorrow palpable. She photographed them all, not intrusively, but from a distance, documenting grief in its many forms. The private moments people shared with the dead. And as she looked through the viewfinder, she understood something. Grief wasn't linear. It wasn't performative. It didn't follow rules or timelines. It was as individual as the relationship it mourned. She'd grieved Marco, not his death, but the marriage that had never been real, the love she'd imagined, The years she'd lost trying to be enough for someone who'd never valued her. That grief had been valid, even if it didn't match what others expected. And now, on the other side of it, she'd found something she'd never imagined possible: redemption through being seen, through choosing herself, through loving and being loved in return by someone who celebrated rather than diminished her. She drove home, to Luca's loft, their loft now, as the sun began its descent. Found him in the kitchen, cooking again, music playing softly. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening. "How was it?" he asked. "Necessary. Final." She set her camera on the counter. "I told him about us." "And?" "And he didn't answer because he's dead." She moved into Luca's space, her arms circling his waist. "But I think I finally forgave him, and myself, for all of it." He kissed the top of her head. "That's brave. I learned from the best." They cooked together, a new ritual they'd developed. She chopped vegetables while he managed the stove, their movements synchronized from weeks of practice. They talked about her day, the photographs from the cemetery, whether they'd be too dark for the magazine or exactly right. "I want to do a series on grief," she said. "Different kinds. Not just death, but all the losses we carry. Ended relationships, lost dreams. The versions of ourselves we bury. That's ambitious. You told me to be ambitious." "I did." He turned from the stove, his eyes intense. "And you should be. Your vision is powerful, Elena. Don't diminish it." After dinner, they sat on the couch, her legs draped over his lap, comfortable silence settling between them. She edited photographs on her laptop while he read, his hand absently stroking her ankle. Domestic, easy. The kind of quiet intimacy Marco had never understood, being together without needing to fill the space with words. "I have to go to Milan next week," Luca said eventually. "Business, 3 days." Her stomach dropped, though she tried not to show it. "Okay. Come with me." She looked up, surprised. "Really? Really? You can photograph the city. I'll work during the day, and we'll have the evenings. Unless—" He paused. "Unless you don't want to be associated with the business side of my life." "Is it dangerous what you do there?" "Sometimes, but this trip is mostly meetings, boring corporate politics dressed up as family business." His expression grew serious. "I won't lie to you, Elena. Parts of what I do exist in grey areas. Legal, but morally ambiguous. I manage the family's legitimate holdings, but those holdings were built on foundations that weren't always legitimate. I can't change the past, but I'm trying to redirect the future." She considered this. The cognitive dissonance of loving a man whose power came from sources she'd rather not examine too closely. But she'd known who he was from the beginning. He'd never hidden it. "I'll come," she said, "on one condition." "Name it." "You keep being honest with me. About everything. If something happens that puts us in danger, if the business becomes something I can't ethically support, you tell me. You give me the choice to stay or go." "I can do that." He pulled her closer. "Though I should warn you, I'm going to make it very difficult for you to want to leave." "Arrogant. Confident. There's a difference." He kissed her, slow and thorough. "Now show me these cemetery photographs. I want to see grief through your eyes." She showed him. The elderly woman, the crying man, the grieving family. Marco's grave with its fresh flowers and long shadows. Each image a story, a moment of private sorrow made visible. "This one," Luca said, pointing to the photograph of Marco's grave. "This is the one that should anchor your series." "Why?" "Because it's yours. Your grief, your closure, your refusal to perform emotions you don't feel. It's honest in a way these others aren't." He looked at her. "Everyone expects widows to be destroyed, to wear black and weep and never move on. But you're proof that grief can coexist with joy, that honoring the dead doesn't mean dying with them." The words pierced something deep. She'd spent weeks worrying that her feelings for Luca meant she'd never properly loved Marco. But maybe love was more complicated than that. Maybe you could grieve a marriage while celebrating its end. Maybe you could honor someone's memory while refusing to be imprisoned by it. "I want to call the series After," she said, "because it's not about the loss itself. It's about what comes after. how we rebuild, how we choose to keep living. Perfect. Luca closed the laptop, setting it aside. Now stop working. Come to bed. Let me show you what comes after grief. She went. Let him peel away her clothes slowly, reverently, his hands and mouth mapping her body like territory worth claiming. Let herself feel the pleasure without guilt, the desire without shame. Let herself be present in her own life, her own skin, her own becoming. Later in the dark, with his arm heavy across her waist and his breath warm against her neck, she whispered, "Thank you." For what? For seeing me, when no one else did. His arm tightened. Thank you for letting me. Some photographs capture endings. Others capture the moment transformation becomes inevitable. Milan was rain and cobblestones and architecture that made Elena's photographer heart soar. They arrived in the evening, the city gleaming wet and golden under streetlights. Luca had booked a suite at a boutique hotel in the fashion district, all marble and velvet and views of the Duomo. "Tomorrow I have meetings," he said, loosening his tie as they entered the room. "But tonight is yours. Where do you want to go?" "Nowhere." She turned to him, suddenly shy despite everything they'd shared. "I just want to be here, with you, in a city where no one knows us, where we can just be us." His expression softened. "Then that's what we'll do." They ordered room service. Ate on the floor by the window, watching the rain streak the glass and blur the city lights into impressionist beauty. Talked about nothing important, favorite books, childhood dreams, the small details that make a person knowable. "Did you always want this life?" Elena asked. "The family business, the power, all of it?" "No." Luca set down his wineglass. "I wanted to be an architect, design buildings, create beauty that would outlast me." He smiled sadly. "But my father had other plans. The eldest son runs the business. That's how it works. So I put away the drafting table and learned contracts instead. Violence instead of beauty. Do you regret it?" "Sometimes, but regret is useless. I can't change what I am. I can only try to be the best version of it." He looked at her. "What about you? Did you always want to be a photographer?" "Always. Since I was 8 and my grandmother gave me my first camera, I loved that I could freeze moments, make them permanent. As if capturing them meant they couldn't leave me." Her throat tightened. "My parents died when I was 10, car accident, and I became obsessed with photographing everything, as if the more images I took, the less I'd lose." "I'm sorry." Luca took her hand. "That must have been terrifying." "It was. I went to live with my aunt, but she didn't really want me. I was just obligation. So I learned to be quiet, unobtrusive, easy to overlook." She laughed bitterly. "Which probably made me perfect for Marco, a woman who'd already practiced disappearing. You're not invisible anymore." "No." She met his eyes. "Because you refused to let me be." He pulled her into his lap, and they sat like that, her back against his chest, his arms around her waist, watching the rain. The intimacy felt different here, removed from the family drama, the scandal, the weight of their complicated beginning. Here, they were just Elena and Luca. Two people who'd found each other against all logic. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "about tomorrow's meeting." Her stomach tensed. "Okay. I'm meeting with Antonio, Marco's uncle. He's been trying to convince the family to force you out of your inheritance. Claims you're unfit, that the relationship with me proves you were unfaithful to Marco even before his death." Anger flared hot. "That's ridiculous." "I know, but he has support. Several cousins, some of the older generation, they want to contest the will, tie your assets up in legal battles that could take years. Can they do that? They can try, but I won't let them succeed." His arms tightened around her. "Tomorrow's meeting is me making it clear that anyone who comes for you comes through me, that your position is non-negotiable, that the family can accept us or face consequences." "What kind of consequences?" He was silent for a moment. "The kind I'd rather you not know details about." There it was, the darkness he'd warned her about, the parts of his world that operated in shadows and violence. She should be horrified, should demand specifics, should force him to choose between her and whatever ruthless methods he employed. But she'd asked for honesty, not details, and she trusted that he wouldn't do anything without reason, that his power, however ambiguous its source, was wielded with purpose. "Will you be safe?" she asked instead. "Always. Antonio's greedy and petty, but he's not suicidal. He knows I'm untouchable." "Okay." She leaned back against him. "Then I trust you." "Just like that?" "Just like that." His breath shuddered out. "You have no idea what that means to me. That trust." They went to bed early, the rain providing soft soundtrack. Made love slowly, tenderly, Luca taking his time in ways that made her gasp and clutch and finally cry out his name like a prayer. Afterward, wrapped in expensive sheets and each other, she felt safer than she'd ever felt anywhere. "I love you," she whispered into the dark. "I love you," he returned. "More than is probably wise." "Good. I like you unwise." His laugh vibrated through her. "Sleep. Tomorrow I have to be the mafia boss everyone fears, but tonight I'm just yours." She drifted off to the sound of his heartbeat and the rain against the windows, thinking that this, being chosen, being loved, being seen, was worth any scandal. The next morning, Luca left early for his meeting. Elena woke alone but not lonely, ordered coffee and pastries, and took her camera out into the city. Milan in morning light was breathtaking. The Duomo's Gothic spires piercing grey sky, the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II with its glass-vaulted arcade, fashionable Italians moving with enviable ease. She photographed it all. The geometry of architecture, the play of light through ancient streets, the contrast between old world and new. Got lost deliberately, finding corners tourists never saw. Stopped for espresso at a tiny cafe, where the owner insisted on explaining the history of the building in broken English. Around noon, her phone buzzed. "Luca, how's the photography going?" "Beautiful. This city is a dream." "Good. Dinner tonight at 8. I'm taking you somewhere special." "How did the meeting go?" A pause. Then, "Productively." She wanted to ask more, but his terse response suggested boundaries. He'd said he'd be honest, not that he'd provide details. She could live with that. That evening she dressed carefully, a simple black dress that somehow felt sophisticated here in Milan, in a way it never had at home. Luca appeared at 7:30, looking sharp in a suit that had definitely been tailored on this trip. But his expression was tight, controlled. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Fine, just a long day of reminding people why it's unwise to cross me." He kissed her forehead. "But now I'm here with you, and the rest doesn't matter." He took her to a restaurant in the Navigli district, intimate, candlelit, with food that made her reconsider every meal she'd ever eaten before. They talked about her day, the photographs she'd taken, her ideas for the grief series. He asked questions that showed he'd been listening all along, that her work mattered to him, but she could sense something beneath his calm, a tension he was trying to hide. "Luca." She set down her fork. "What happened in the meeting?" "I told you. Antonio and I reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" His jaw tightened. "The kind where he withdraws his legal challenges and stops questioning your inheritance, in exchange for certain accommodations regarding family business matters." "That's vague." "It needs to be." He met her eyes. "I'm trying to protect you from the uglier parts of this world, Elena. Please let me. I don't want protection through ignorance. I want partnership through honesty." He studied her for a long moment. Then, "Fine. Antonio wanted a larger share of the Eastern European shipping contracts. I gave it to him. In exchange, he signed documents acknowledging your legal right to Marco's assets and agreeing never to contest them again. He also agreed to publicly support our relationship at the next family gathering." "How did you convince him?" "By making it clear that refusal would result in him losing far more than shipping contracts." His expression was stone. "I didn't threaten his life, if that's what you're asking, but I made sure he understood that I control enough of the family infrastructure to make his business interests very difficult if he continued this vendetta." Elena absorbed this. It wasn't violence, not exactly, but it was certainly coercion, the wielding of power to force outcomes. Should she be disturbed? Probably. But all she felt was relief that he'd protected her interests and gratitude that he'd been honest about the method. "Thank you," she said. He looked surprised. "You're not horrified?" "Should I be? You used leverage to protect me from a man trying to steal what's legally mine. That seems strategic, not cruel." Many would disagree. Many didn't spend 3 years being dismissed and diminished by that family. She reached across the table, taking his hand. "I'm not naive, Luca. I know who you are, what you do, and I've chosen you anyway. Stop waiting for me to be horrified and accept that I see you clearly." Something in his expression cracked open, vulnerable and raw. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not. I don't deserve you either. But here we are anyway." He stood abruptly, throwing money on the table, far too much. "Come on. Where?" "Back to the hotel. Now." His eyes had gone dark, hungry. "Because I need to show you exactly what it means to me that you see me and choose me anyway." They barely made it to the room before he was kissing her, pressing her against the closed door, his hands everywhere at once. The tension from the day, the relief, the gratitude, it all combusted into desperate need. They made love against the door, then on the floor, then finally in the bed, each time feeling like an exorcism and acclaiming both. Later, exhausted and tangled in sheets, she traced the scar on his shoulder. A knife wound from years ago, he'd told her once, from a deal gone wrong. "Tell me about this," she said. "Why?" "Because I want to know you, all of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable." So he told her. About the early days of taking over the family business, when his authority was constantly tested. About the attempted coup by a cousin who'd thought him too soft, too educated, not ruthless enough. About the fight that had ended with Luca proving exactly how ruthless he could be. "I broke his arm," Luca said quietly. "Shattered it in 3 places, made sure he'd never be able to hold a gun properly again. And I did it in front of everyone. A message about what happens when someone challenges me. Do you regret it?" "No, because it worked. No one seriously challenged my authority since." He turned to look at her. "Does that scare you?" She thought about it honestly. "It should. But it doesn't. Because I also know you spent 3 hours helping the hotel staff find a lost child last year, that you've been secretly funding an art program for at-risk youth, that you cry at Italian operas when you think no one's watching." He actually blushed. "How do you know about the child?" "Gabriella told me, Marco's ex. She approached me at a cafe last week, said she wanted to apologize for the affair, and she told me that story. Said Marco used to mock you for it, for caring about a stranger's kid, but she thought it showed you were a good man underneath the armor. Did she apologize? For the affair?" "She did. Said she was weak and stupid, and that Marco was persuasive. But that she'd always felt guilty about me." Elena paused. "I told her I forgave her, because holding on to that anger was exhausting, and because she was just another person Marco hurt." "You're remarkable." Luca pulled her closer. "The way you choose grace over bitterness, redemption over revenge. I learned it from you." "No, you always had it. I just helped you remember." They fell asleep like that, her head on his chest, his arms around her, Milan glittering outside their window. 2 people from different worlds, building something new in the spaces between light and shadow. Some cities change us. Others just reveal who we've been becoming all along. They returned from Milan to find the family summoning them to Sunday dinner. A command, not an invitation. The first formal gathering since the gala where Eleanor and Luca had gone public. She'd been dreading this, the judgment, the barely concealed hostility, the performance of unity over a meal. "We don't have to go," Luca said, reading her anxiety. "Yes, we do. Running won't change anything, and I'm tired of being afraid of them. Then we go together. And we leave the moment you're uncomfortable." Deal. Sunday arrived with the particular dread of inevitable confrontation. Eleanor dressed carefully, not armor this time, but quiet confidence. A cream sweater, well-fitted trousers, minimal jewelry. She wanted to look at ease, like someone who belonged in her own skin even if she didn't belong in their world. The Damiano estate looked the same, imposing, beautiful, cold. But walking up the steps with Luca's hand in hers felt different than it had all those times as Marco's invisible wife. She wasn't seeking approval anymore. She was claiming her right to exist. Teresa met them at the door, her expression glacial. "Elena, Luca, how unexpected to see you together." "Is it?" Luca's tone was mild but edged. "I sent word we'd be arriving together. I assumed you'd come to your senses by now." "I have. That's why I'm here with her." They moved past Teresa into the dining room, where the family had already gathered. Antonio was there, looking sour but subdued. Whatever Luca had done in Milan had clearly been effective. The cousins watched with avid curiosity. And Gabriella, surprisingly, was also present, apparently still included in family events despite the broken engagement to Marco years ago. Luca guided Elena to seats in the middle of the table, not hidden at the end, not separate, but integrated. A statement. Dinner began with excruciating politeness. Conversation flowed around them, business matters, society gossip, family updates, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. Elena pushed food around her plate, hyper-aware of every glance, every whispered exchange. Then Teresa set down her wineglass with deliberate precision. "So, shall we address the scandal, or continue pretending my son's widow isn't sleeping with my eldest?" The room fell silent. Elena felt every muscle tense, preparing for attack, but Luca's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "There's no scandal," he said calmly. "Just two adults choosing each other." 2 months after Marco's death," Antonio interjected. "It's unseemly." "What's unseemly is Marco's infidelity throughout his marriage," Elena said, surprising herself with her steadiness. "What's unseemly is this family's willingness to overlook his cruelty while judging me for finding happiness after his death." "How dare you?" Teresa started. "No." Gabriella's voice cut through. Everyone turned to stare at her. "Let her speak. God knows we've all stayed silent long enough." Elena looked at the other woman, Marco's great love, the one he'd never stopped wanting. They shared a moment of understanding, both casualties of the same selfish man. "Marco was cruel," Gabriella continued. "To Elena, to me, to anyone who loved him. He took what he wanted and discarded what he didn't. And this family enabled him because he was charming, because he fit the image of what a Damiano should be." She turned to Teresa. "You know it's true, you just won't admit it. My son was human, flawed, sometimes deliberately hurtful." Gabriella's voice softened. "And he's dead, which is tragic. But his death doesn't make him a saint, and it doesn't mean Elena should spend the rest of her life performing grief she doesn't feel." The words landed like stones in still water. Teresa looked between Gabriella and Elena, something crumbling in her expression. For a moment, Elena almost felt sorry for her, a mother desperately clinging to the fiction of who her son had been, rather than accepting the reality. "She's right," one of the cousins, Maria, said quietly. "We all knew. About Gabriella, about the other women. We just didn't say anything. Because that's what we do," another cousin added. "We protect the family image over the truth. We enable the men and judge the women. It's exhausting." The room shifted. Not everyone agreed. Some faces remained hostile, unconvinced. But cracks were forming in the unified front. People were choosing honesty over performance. Luca stood, pulling Elena up with him. "We're leaving, but before we do, understand this. Elena is family now, my family. Anyone who disrespects her, who tries to undermine her, who makes her life difficult, they answer to me, and I won't be gentle." "Is that a threat?" Antonio demanded. "It's a promise." Luca's expression was granite. "I've spent years managing this family's interests, protecting its secrets, cleaning up its messes, and I'm done prioritizing your comfort over the people I love. You can accept Elena, or you can lose me. Choose." The ultimatum hung in the air, electric and dangerous. Teresa looked like she might explode. Antonio looked calculating. But several of the younger generation, the cousins who'd spoken up, who'd acknowledged the family's toxicity, looked relieved. "I choose acceptance," Maria said, standing. "For what it's worth. I think you deserve happiness, Elena. Both of you. As do I, Gabriella added. One by one, several others murmured agreement. Not everyone, not even most, but enough to matter. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from the surreal relief of being defended, of people choosing truth over comfortable fiction, of her worth being acknowledged in a space that had only ever diminished her. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you." Luca led her toward the door. Teresa called after them, her voice desperate and angry both. "If you walk out that door, then we'll keep walking," Luca said without turning. "Goodbye, Mother." They left, got in the car, drove away from the estate in charged silence. When they were safely away, Luca pulled over, turning to her. "Are you okay?" "I think so." She laughed shakily. "That was intense. You were magnificent." He cupped her face. "Do you know how proud I am of you?" "For what?" "Gabriella and the others did all the defending. For standing there, for speaking your truth, for refusing to be small." He kissed her softly. "You're so much stronger than you realize." "I'm starting to believe that." They drove home. Their home, the loft that smelled like both of them, where her photographs covered the walls and his books filled the shelves, made dinner together, curled up on the couch with wine and the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. "Some of them will come around," Luca said eventually. "The younger generation especially. They're tired of the old ways. And your mother may never forgive me, but that's her choice." He turned to look at her. "I choose you, Elena, every time, even if it costs me everything." "It won't. We'll build our own family, our own world." I like the sound of that. Later, in bed, she thought about the dinner, about Gabriella's defense, Maria's support, the way Luca had claimed her so publicly, about the fact that for the first time in her life, she hadn't shrunk in the face of judgment. She'd stood her ground. Maybe that was what love did. Not complete you, but help you remember you'd always been whole. Some dinners are battles, others are declarations of war. And sometimes you win just by refusing to surrender. 3 months later, Elena's photography exhibition opened at the same gallery where Luca had first shown her forgotten work. But this time, the photographs were new. The grief series she'd poured herself into. Images of loss in its many forms. The cemetery photographs, strangers mourning, empty spaces where people used to be, and at the center, a self-portrait she'd taken in Marco's empty house before moving out completely. In the image, she stood in the middle of the living room, soft focus surrounded by packed boxes. Not sad, but transitional. A woman between lives. The title, After. The opening was invitation only. Press, collectors, art critics, friends. She'd been terrified no one would come, that her work would be dismissed as the hobby of a rich widow. But the gallery was packed, and the responses were overwhelming. "This one," a critic said, pointing to the cemetery photograph of Marco's grave. "This is stunning. The way you've captured grief without sentimentality, it's rare." "Thank you," Elena managed. Luca moved through the crowd with her, his hand never leaving her back. Supportive, but not overbearing. Letting her have this moment while making sure she knew he was there. She saw Gabriella arrive, Maria and several younger Damiano cousins with her, even the magazine editor who'd commissioned her first essay. "You did it," the editor said, embracing her. "This is extraordinary work, Elena. We want to feature you in our next issue, a profile on emerging artists to watch." "Really? Really? You have a voice, a vision. Don't waste it." The evening blurred into a beautiful chaos of conversations, champagne, strangers asking about her process. She felt like she was floating, untethered from the woman she'd been, not yet landed in who she was becoming, but euphoric in the transition. Near the end of the evening, Teresa Damiano appeared. Elena's stomach dropped. She hadn't invited her, hadn't thought the woman would come if she had. But there she stood, dressed in severe black, studying the photographs with an unreadable expression. Luca tensed beside Elena. "Do you want me to—" "No, I'll talk to her." She approached carefully, unsure what to expect. Teresa stood before the self-portrait, the one titled After, her expression inscrutable. "It's beautiful," Teresa said quietly, not looking at Elena. "All of it. You're very talented." "Thank you. I didn't know. When Marco was alive, I didn't know you could do this." Now she turned and her eyes were wet. "I didn't know anything about you, really. You were just the girl he married, the quiet one who never made waves. That's who I tried to be. For him. For all of you. And we let you disappear." Teresa's voice cracked. "I'm sorry for how I treated you, for the things I said. You were grieving a different kind of loss, and I made it worse because I couldn't face the truth about my son." Elena didn't know what to say. She'd imagined this confrontation dozens of times, had rehearsed cutting remarks, righteous anger. But standing here, facing a mother's raw grief and belated understanding, she found she didn't want cruelty. She wanted closure. "He wasn't all bad," Elena said gently. "Marco, he had moments of kindness, of charm. He just wasn't capable of loving me the way I needed. And that's not your fault. I enabled him, made excuses, let him think the world owed him everything." Teresa wiped her eyes. "And I lost both my sons because of it. One to death, one to my own stubbornness." "You haven't lost Luca, he's right there." Elena gestured to where he stood, watching them warily. "But you have to accept me, us, or you'll lose him by choice." Teresa looked at her son, then back at Elena. "He loves you. I can see it. The way he looks at you. Marco never looked at anyone like that. Not even Gabriella. I love him too." "I know." Teresa took a shaky breath. "Will you forgive me? I know I don't deserve it, but—" "I forgive you," Elena interrupted. "Not because you've earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger. It's too heavy." Teresa's composure crumbled. She pulled Elena into an awkward embrace, brief, stiff, but genuine. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a chance, and for loving my son better than I did." When they separated, Luca was there, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Mother," he said carefully, "don't. I know I've been awful." Teresa looked between them. "I'm trying to be better, to accept that the family I imagined isn't the one I have, and that maybe the real one is better." "It will take time," Luca said. "I know, but I'd like to try. If you'll let me." He nodded slowly. "Dinner. Next week. Just the three of us." "I'd like that." After Teresa left, Elena sagged against Luca. "That was unexpected. You didn't have to forgive her." "I know. But holding on to that resentment was exhausting. And she's your mother. I don't want to be the reason you're estranged." "You're never the reason. Her behavior was." He kissed her temple. "But thank you. For being the bigger person. Again. I learned it from you." "No. That's all you, love." The evening wound down. Collectors placed bids. Press requested interviews. And Elena stood in the middle of her own exhibition, her work on the walls, her vision validated, her voice finally heard, and felt the last piece of her old self fall away. She wasn't Marco's widow anymore. Wasn't the invisible girl trying to earn love through smallness. She was Elena Damiano, photographer, woman, survivor. Someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged instead of broken. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked, his arms circling her waist from behind. "That I'm happy. Really, truly happy. For the first time in, maybe ever." "Good. You deserve it." He turned her to face him. "There's something I want to ask you." Her heart skipped. "Okay." He reached into his pocket, and Elena's breath stopped. But what he pulled out wasn't a ring, it was a key. "I know we're already living together," he said, "but this is different. This is the key to a studio space I rented. 3 blocks from the loft, north-facing windows, perfect light. It's yours, for your work. So you have space that's completely your own. No compromises, no sharing." Tears blurred her vision. "Luca, I love you," he continued, "and part of loving you means making sure you never have to disappear again, that you always have room to create, to grow, to be exactly who you are. So this is my promise, you'll always have space. In my life, in my home, in the world. She took the key with shaking hands, then threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with all the gratitude and love and overwhelming emotion she couldn't articulate. Around them, the remaining guests politely looked away, giving them this moment. "Thank you," she whispered against his mouth, "for everything, for seeing me, for believing in me, for loving me into becoming." "No, you did the becoming yourself. I just had the honor of witnessing it." They stayed at the gallery until midnight, until the last guest had left and the owner was gently suggesting they should probably leave. Walked home through streets that felt magical in the way only triumph makes things feel. Her hand in his, their future bright with possibility. At home they made love slowly, reverently, each touch a celebration of what they'd built together, of the forbidden love that had become the most honest thing in both their lives, of survival and choice, and the courage to claim happiness even when the world said you shouldn't. "I want to marry you," Luca said afterward, both of them tangled in sheets and moonlight. "Someday, when you're ready, when the world's had time to stop judging, or maybe just when we decide we don't care if they judge anymore." Eleanor's heart swelled. "Ask me again in a year, when I've published a book of these photographs, when we've traveled somewhere neither of us has been, when we're sure this isn't just intensity mistaken for permanence." "It's not. I know, but ask me anyway. Let me have the joy of saying yes when I'm even more certain than I am now." "Deal." He kissed her forehead. "1 year, and then I'm making you my wife officially, not just my partner. Not just the woman I love, but family in every legal, permanent, undeniable way. I look forward to it." Some exhibitions showcase art. Others showcase transformation. And sometimes, the most powerful work is the life you build after everything breaks. The book released to critical acclaim. After, Photographs of Grief and Becoming. Elena's grief series expanded, refined, turned into something powerful enough that galleries across Europe requested it. She traveled for the exhibitions, Paris, Barcelona, Amsterdam, with Luca joining her when his business allowed. The family had fragmented, then reformed into something new. Teresa made genuine efforts to rebuild her relationship with Luca, treating Elena with tentative respect that slowly warmed to affection. Some family members never accepted them. Antonio had essentially excommunicated himself, refusing to acknowledge Elena's existence. But the younger generation rallied, creating a new kind of Damiano family that valued honesty over image. Gabriella had become an unexpected friend, meeting Elena for coffee, talking about art and life and the men they'd both loved badly. There was something healing in their friendship, both women reclaiming their stories from Marco's ghost. Elena's career flourished beyond anything she'd imagined. Magazine commissions, gallery shows, teaching opportunities at prestigious art schools. She'd bought the studio space next to the one Luca had rented her, expanding her creative world. Had hired an assistant, was working on a second book. But the best part, the part that made her chest ache with gratitude, was the life she'd built with Luca. Not perfect, but real. They fought sometimes, about small things. His overprotectiveness, her tendency to lose herself in work. But they fought fair with respect, always coming back to each other. They'd traveled to Japan that spring, where she'd photographed cherry blossoms and ancient temples while he'd negotiated business deals. To Iceland in summer, where the midnight sun had turned the world dreamlike. To Brazil, where her photography had earned her an unexpected award from an international arts council. And through it all, Luca had been her partner, not her savior. She'd saved herself. But the person who'd made space for her becoming, who'd believed in her before she'd believed in herself. Now standing in their loft with both their names on the lease, she looked at the walls covered in her work, at his books mingling with hers on the shelves, at the life they'd created together, and felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Luca asked, coming up behind her with 2 glasses of wine. "How far we've come, how different everything is from a year ago. Do you miss anything about before?" She considered it honestly. "No, not even a little. That version of me needed to die so this one could exist. I'm glad she did, though I would have loved you either way." "Liar. You barely noticed me when I was Marco's wife." Wrong. He turned her to face him. I noticed everything. Every time you smiled genuinely versus politely. Every book you read when you thought no one was watching. Every moment you looked like you were holding your breath, waiting for permission to exist. And now? Now you breathe like you own the air. He set down the wine glasses. Which brings me to something. Oh no, the last time you had something, you rented me a studio. This is bigger. He pulled a small box from his pocket, velvet, worn, clearly vintage. Elena's heart stopped. Luca, it's been a year. You said to ask you in a year. When you'd published your book, when we'd traveled, when you were certain this was permanent. He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, and emerald surrounded by small diamonds. This was my grandmother's, the only woman in the family who ever told me to marry for love, not strategy. I want you to have it. Tears blurred her vision. You're asking? I'm asking. He took her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Elena Damiano, will you marry me? Not to fix what Marco broke, not to legitimize our relationship to the family, but because I love you. Because you're my partner, my best friend, the person who makes me believe in things I'd given up on, because I want to spend the rest of my life making space for you to become whoever you're meant to be next. She couldn't speak around the emotion clogging her throat, could only nod frantically, laughing and crying simultaneously. Is that a yes? He asked, smiling. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. She let him slide the ring onto her finger, perfect fit, as if it had been waiting for her. I love you so much. You gave me my life back, gave me myself back. No. He cupped her face, his eyes intense. You did that. I just loved you while you did. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. And Elena kissed him back, tasting joy and future and the particular sweetness of choosing someone who chose her just as fiercely. Around them, the city glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Their city now, their life, built not on the ruins of what came before, but on the foundation of honesty, redemption, and the courage to love without apology. Everyone mocks me, she whispered, remembering the cruel words from the funeral, from society, from people who'd never believed she deserved happiness. Luca smiled, fierce and proud. Now they will fear you, because you became exactly who you were meant to be. And that's the most powerful thing in the world. He was right. She'd stopped being the broken-hearted widow defined by others' perceptions, had claimed her power not through manipulation or force, but through the radical act of choosing herself, had transformed forbidden love into the foundation of something unshakable. They made love that night with new tenderness, not as lovers anymore, but as soon-to-be spouses, as partners who'd survived scandal and judgment and emerged stronger, as two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Later, as Luca slept beside her, Elena stared at the ring on her finger, catching moonlight and throwing it back in emerald fire. She thought about the woman she'd been at Marco's funeral, invisible, grieving, lost, and she thought about who she'd become, artist, survivor, someone who'd learned that the greatest love story wasn't about being completed by someone else. It was about being seen, being chosen, being loved for exactly who you are while becoming who you're meant to be. She picked up her camera from the nightstand, adjusted the settings, and took a photograph. The ring in focus, Luca sleeping peacefully behind it, their loft bathed in silver light. A moment of perfect peace after years of turbulence. She'd call this one becoming, because that's what love did. Not change you, but give you permission to change yourself. Not complete you, but create space for your own completion. Not save you, but stand beside you while you saved yourself. And as Elena drifted off to sleep, her hand in Luca's, the ring warm against her skin, she felt something she'd never felt before, certain, of herself, of this choice, of the beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they'd built together. Some stories end in loss, others end in transformation, and the best ones, the ones worth telling, end in becoming. Some loves don't stay, but they all change us. The broken-hearted widow became the woman who refused to be defined by grief, The mafia boss became the man who learned that true power lies in making space for another person's becoming. And together, they built something that scandal couldn't touch and judgment couldn't diminish. If this story reminded you of someone, of a time you found yourself in ruins or discovered love in unexpected places, or chose yourself when the world told you not to, share it in the comments. Tell us about your own transformation, your own forbidden love, your own redemption. And subscribe, there's a new story every night because some stories never end, they just take new shapes. And the most powerful ones remind us that becoming who we're meant to be is the greatest love story of all.